All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
This is fun. Here we go. All right. Good afternoon and welcome to VentureLab's Female Founders.
I know.
All right, we are now in our 6th iteration of the series. And before we get started, I'm going to take a few moments to give you a little intro on what Female Founders is, and as well as a little introduction on about our team. So I'll start with our team. My name is Leah.
Hey, Leah, I'm going to pause you for just a second. We've got a lot of background noise going on. Is there something on your end? Because I think I muted everybody else.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Why don't you start over with this slide because it was pretty garbled.
With the beginning?
No, just this one.
Okay. So this is our team. I'm Leah. I'm the Educational Outreach Coordinator at Georgia Tech's VentureLab. I help to plan and run programs such as these with my teaching team, Sarah, Melissa, and Namu. VentureLab is also the National Science Foundation's I-Core South regional node. We are a startup incubator for Georgia Tech startups and entrepreneurial teams. We also work with teams across the Southeast region due to our affiliation with the National Science Foundation. Okay, so the why. The idea for Female Founders came from the realization that there are just so many brilliant people out there at Georgia Tech who weren't totally being represented or weren't necessarily joining our programs at VentureLab. So it was decided enough is enough, and now is the time because why not now? And some research was actually done and found that women are not as well funded or invested in, but were outperforming their male-founded startup counterparts. So it became essential for us to figure out how to build a community where like-minded leaders could come together and learn key lessons in the startup journey. This was built to become a cohort dedicated to women supporting women. So who's it for? Well, we're inviting all female-led entrepreneurial teams or individuals to apply. Students, staff, faculty, community-based teams are all invited. The criteria is that teams are led or co-led by a female entrepreneur. Men are still welcome to attend, but again, we're looking for those teams to be female-led. Our website is here if you're interested. We're going to have another program in the spring of 2022, so feel free to check out our website. All right. Now, joined with us this month is Kacie Lett and Katie Mullins, co-founders of It All Media and co-creators of the It All podcast. This podcast was born from the need to hear and share more stories about bold women living bravely, and for those who are intentionally redefining what it means to have it all. I'd also like to give you guys a birthday shout out for just turning 1 year old. Congratulations on that milestone. And without further ado, I'd like to take it over and pass it on to Katie and Kacie. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and thank you so much to our audience for being here.
Hey everyone, thanks for the intro, Leah. And I would like to welcome all of you. I'm Melissa Hefner. I am a program director at Georgia Tech's VentureLab and co-creator of the Female Founders program with my lovely colleague, Sarah Henderson, who is out on maternity leave right now. Congrats, Sarah. Female Founders is an entrepreneurship program by and for women. And today we're flipping the roles a little bit and interviewing podcast creators, Kacie and Katie, about their brainchild, It All Media. You're used to being the interviewers, and now you get to sit on the other side of the table today. So thanks so much for being here and for chatting with us. I want to start it off with how you describe your own podcast. You say that your podcast is a love letter to the brave women who are intentionally redefining what it means to have it all. So Kacie, tell us what did having it all mean to you a year ago, 16 months ago, 18 months ago?
That is such a beautiful and loaded question. And I will tell you all, I have proper anxiety of being the one being interviewed. I so often am the one asking questions. So thank you, Melissa, for having us. I'll cut to maybe 2 years ago, because I think that's probably a more realistic place of where my all aligned with probably some version that all of you have experienced in some capacity. I like to give a giant asterisk to any group I'm talking to. Katie and I are both two cis white women with advanced degrees. We come with a tremendous amount of privilege in any of this. And so recognizing that to get to a place of wholeness and fulfillment, doing our passion, that comes with having base needs met. And so I just like to give that because I recognize our realities are not everyone's reality. At late 20s, right, turning 30, I would say on paper, if you had asked younger Kacie or even many versions out there, many of women out there today, I had it all. I was promoted to senior vice president, leading about a $10 million consulting practice as I went out on maternity leave. I was having my first daughter with a wonderful partner. I had the house. I joke I had the dog. Like I had it all. And 6 months postpartum, wanted to drive my car off the road. And I say, not necessarily to kill myself, but if I could maim myself hard enough to not have to be responsible for anything else, that'd be great. And that was this moment. It was so visceral. I can just picture it now of what a devastating reality if my daughter, with all of her privilege, education, network, access, experience, would rather drive her car off the road than to take action and do something about it. Fortunately, I give, again, giant asterisks. I had an incredible support system. My husband, my co-founder, who at the time was just a best friend of 9 years, living a world away in Thailand. These were the people that I turned to. And I said, I thought this is what I wanted. And I'm devastated. I'm grieving the loss of that. But as I started questioning that, I didn't know where to turn. I looked at my professional relationships had known me in one capacity. My personal relationships were used to me being, Katie has a line, the strong friend, right? I was the one that had it together. And in that, I just felt tremendously alone. And that was the birth of this. I said, well, shit, if I had it all and that wasn't enough, then what does it mean? Somewhere along the line of the option 2, that you can have it all, became this notion that we must. And that was so flawed. And that's where, we're here to cross out the must and say, truly you can, but you get to pick that all. And that was the starting place for me. It was really a question born from my own, mental and real life crisis.
Yeah, it's those pivotal moments. You call it those it all moments, right? You've coined that, but those moments where there's a fork in the road and we've got to figure out what we're doing next, if we're moving forward at all, right? Because we've definitely had those moments as well. So Katie, tell us how you got pulled into this and what, did you have an it all moment or did you live vicariously through Kacie's it all moment? What did this journey look like for you?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Wilson. Thanks for having us here today. I'm so excited. So my journey was a little bit different. As Kacie said, I was living in Thailand at the time, but I had just had a bit of a critical eruption myself in my life. I was in a 7-year relationship, which ended rather unexpectedly. And I had been in my job for about 2 years too long. And I was really feeling the tension there. I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, so down in the South, and it was very much like, I think, trying to fit into that kind of societal structure and expectations. And as soon as my relationship kind of ended, I decided to make a jump to Thailand. I've traveled internationally and held jobs internationally several times throughout my career, but I was really ready for kind of a new skill set. And this seemed like a great opportunity to, I think, explore that, to get back to myself. And so in that, I chose myself over what I think my family would have expected, over what my friends were telling me to do. And I didn't want to sit in it in the same place. I needed to do what I knew was going to bring me back to me. And so in doing that, I went over and I met an extraordinary group of women, one of which who I'm visiting today in Poland. But that became my community, and they were so empowering and so supportive. And it really, changed my life forever. I came back to the States just before COVID hit, and I actually fell right back into old practices. I thought, okay, I've got to get a job with a title. I've got to be in a leadership role for the next few years. And then maybe I'll have the clout to be able to consult, to be able to do what I think I want to do, and then live my life how I want to live my life. And that wasn't true at all. I could have done it right then. And so in kind of trying different outlets to see where I could plug myself in, Kacie called me in January and said, I think this is more than a podcast. I think we need to tell these stories. I think we need to build a community. I think this is a media company. And she was like, I would like you to consider moving to Atlanta and building this with me. And 3 hours later, I called her back and I said, okay, I'm moving and let's do this. And that's exactly what we did. We met in January and kind of did some values foundational organization around how we wanted to build and what this looked like for both of us to make sure that we both had the same vision. And I moved in April and the rest is history. So, and I was very inspired by the people that I met in Thailand because I thought this is exactly it. Women building this community, telling these stories. This is the social impact that has changed my life forever. So.
Yeah, I love, Katie, that you said you made this conscious decision to choose yourself in spite of either, real or perceived expectations that those around you were going to have. Did you receive any kind of pushback, or what were those conversations like when folks saw you going in a path that they weren't anticipating for you? They may not have chosen for you.
Yeah, so I did of course have resistance, and it was really hard because it's hard not to question yourself when you make those leaps, but Kacie says I have this deep knowing and I think that's one of the beautiful things about women is our intuition, and I trusted it. I felt like I knew this is my next move. I felt it in my very being, and so often we're not given the permission to trust our feelings. And so I did that despite, I did have an extremely supportive family. I would say most of the people that pushed on me were more acquaintances or people that said I was going off to eat, pray, love, and find myself. And I was like, no, I actually know myself very well.
And what would be wrong with that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What would be wrong with that?
I've done that a few times, to be fair. But this one I felt like I really was in control. I was in the driver's seat. And my father actually said a beautiful thing to me when I called him and said, I'm moving to Thailand. And he goes, I want to know if you're running to run or if you're running towards something. And he goes, either answer is okay. And I said, I promise you I'm running towards something. And he says, okay, I just wanted to know how to support you.
That's wonderful what a wonderful way to get a little bit more insight into what you're doing without judgment, right? Mm-hmm. That's really beautiful. Kacie, so you started off as a podcast and you thought, I need to do a podcast specifically for women. And then it's grown into this media idea, but why women? What were you, besides the fact that you are a woman, right? What were you seeing? What were you hearing that made you want to go down that path?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So back in 2017, I say that for a long time, and many of you on the call probably empathize with this or relate to this, I have felt like an entrepreneur without an idea. I am raised by two entrepreneurs. The number one thing I've heard my entire life from my mom, who is, the matriarch and leader of our family, is this idea of flexibility and autonomy. And that's the greatest gift you can give yourself in your professional pursuits. And so that's always been in my mind, but I didn't have what I thought was like the $1 million idea. So I had a point where the noise was so loud, new motherhood, some late onset postpartum depression, being a wife, living in COVID, right? Like, let's take that, like recognize there was an entire global pandemic. I was the breadwinner in my family. It was all of this stuff. And I kept saying, well, what is my idea? Back in 2017, I had a similar question and I worked with a coach, and yesterday we did a podcast with career coach Jen Derry. I really recommend that anyone here go listen to it. I think it's the perfect complement to today's session around anyone that's building a business or what I call a big life. She said, stay put, make a list of everything that you have yet to learn and where you're at, and make that your exit strategy. It doesn't mean you pull the ripcord today and you run away, but that is the goal. And what can you learn? So I basically built a business on somebody else's dime. 10 out of 10 recommend. If you can do that before going on your own, right? It allows,
That's what we tell our teams. Yep.
The second is I worked with a coach, the best investment I've ever made in myself. And there were 3 things that came out. There's a book around the subtle art of not giving an F. I won't say it because we're, recorded, but in the book, they talk about goal setting, not being tied to a single binary objective, but making them more outcome driven on a spectrum. So an example of this might be, I want to be honest. Whether I'm talking to my 2-year-old or talking to you all, I can measure myself on my ability to be honest. If I say I want to be a CEO, that's a binary goal. And the minute I accomplish it, likely I'm unfulfilled because you've reached that goal. So that was such a learning for me. And this coach, we came up with 3 things that I wanted to work on or wanted to be my life's work. Connect people, create value, and change what it means to be a woman in business. Those were 3 things that spoke to me as I looked across experiences, paid and unpaid, skills, talents, passions, etc. Cannot recommend this work enough. I was able to bring some of that work into the role I had, but when I started this company, again, I go back to that critical eruption moment, those it all moments where I said, if this is happening at all, I do not want it. And I love to ask a group of men and women, raise your hand if you've ever been told and believed you can have it all. And they're like, yeah, like I've heard that. And then I say to the men, do you feel if I say to you, you can have it all? 9 times out of 10, the reaction is, yeah, no shit, I know. And so if that's the case, like, why is it this like really nuanced thing? And then again, going back to the pressure of we have to have it all, and not only have it all, we have to be it all and do it all, asterisk perfectly. And that is just, I was talking to my therapist the other day and she said, you started this business probably out of your own desire to have accountability beyond yourself. So selfishly, this is my own need for accountability because I need to say it publicly. And that's why women for me is I found that my power, as I started to take on more roles in my life, as my dreams got bigger, I couldn't run at the same pace I was running before. And I think that that's something that we're already holding these stones of responsibilities. We're a daughter, a sister, a friend, a partner, a professional. And then for me, it was motherhood that became this bigger weight. And I say that my ability to show up in the same ways, my tolerance for things became less, not because I wasn't able to do more, but because there were things that were more important with how I wanted to spend my time. Spend my days, the impact and world I wanted to create. And so it was the catalyst of all this. And so for me, it's like, they say, write what you know. It was the idea of being a woman that was true to me. And I recognize whether you are LGBTQIA+, whether you're a BIPOC founder, like there are so many pockets that need this kind of work. But for me, it was around womanhood and those tensions. We are full of all of these tensions that are impossible standards. And I felt like I wanted to start, we say in our business, we're learning, but just as much as we're learning, we are unlearning. What are those real and perceived barriers that we have to begin to unwind? Most of the time, just like any good therapy, it starts with childhood, some initial belief long, long ago that was probably born out of necessity, but may not be true for us anymore. And so I had a great coach, Megan Shakar, Verandi Coaching here in Atlanta. And she said to me, sit with your creativity. You don't need to build day one. There will come a point. You are a resourceful, capable businesswoman. You will find out what it is you need to build, but sit in your creativity and what feels true to you. It will reveal itself. I give, again, giant asterisks. I saved money before I left. I did consulting on the side to pay the bills. I think that we are remiss to talk about this like self-discovery period without the idea of like the very realities of running our lives in a Western culture. Like you have to pay your bills, you have to show up for responsibilities in your life, but there are ways to create space for creativity. And that's where the podcast started for me around women, because it's what I knew. And the minute I sent an email out to my network, I said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. I think I want to tell 10 stories. Within 1 week, I had a backlog of 100 stories. Desirability confirmed, desirability, feasibility, viability, right? The three components there. Desirability confirmed. Every woman I said this to, whether she was 22 or 62, leaned in and was like, yes.
You gave them a platform. You gave them a place to be heard. Yeah.
It was that intuition to what Katie was saying. So that's a bit of a long-winded way, but I think it's all necessary because so often we hear about these moments as a singular moment in time. This is something that has been brewing since 2017. And it was not a switch of a flip of a switch. It is something that I have been has been calling and I have been answering in whatever capacity I could at that point in time. And it was this moment. I think it aligns with what is happening with the mass resignation. It is aligning with what happened around questioning values and COVID. And so many of you that I imagine are on the call in this same place. It was this moment in time that made it right.
Yeah. You mentioned, I mean, there are so many nuggets in what you just said, this idea of non-binary goals, that how freeing is that, right? And also such a good realignment of what you want to do, which you said, how do you want to spend your time? What is important to you? What is valuable to you? And then move forward in what you should be doing based on that. And I would imagine also for a lot of our entrepreneurs, what you said about being okay just to sit in the space and know that you don't have the thing yet, but there will be something for you and you will figure it out and you will allow the creativity to grow however it's going to. You're right. And that has to be very freeing because we don't have it all figured out. And we can't day one and we're not expected to. So yeah, thank you for sharing those. I
have a line, Melissa, that I just like to remind women of, like, perfection is our self-imposed goal. We said something back in early 2021 and it resonated with so many women. I feel most alone in the presence of perfection. I hate perfect people. The girlfriend, the friend, the colleague, the family member who doesn't act like any of their shit is, stuff is wrong. Like, that's the person that makes you feel the worst about yourself.
Yeah.
And so why is it our goal of perfection? When we live and take those chances and say, hey, I don't have it all figured out, it invites a whole other group of women, individuals to do the same. That to me is where, when Katie and I talk about community, I think that can be an overused and sometimes bastardized word. That is what we're talking about. It's this movement of women who support and protect one another. It's not this faux idea of community and that the perfection's the goal. It's to say, here's the areas I skinned my knees and I screwed up and it's okay. And I'm still standing and nobody died.
Yeah, it's the group of people that you're able to have that extremely authentic conversation with and no judgment for it, right? Because they're all struggling with their own deals. So you mentioned it earlier, and I want to ask you about it. So it is unsaid in terms of it all media, but it is very much implied, the F-bomb, right? And that's really bold. So how, Katie, how did you know to go there? How did you know you could go there? I mean, for those of you who haven't seen their logo, make sure you check it out. You're not messing around. So how were you brave? I think I would have been too scared. How did you get the courage to do it?
I think Kacie kind of always puts this really well. I think once you kind of go inward and decide, like, what is next? Like, how am I going to take this from the choice that I've made to turn this outward now and create my it all? And there's a part of that where, like, you might be angry. You're going to probably tick off some people. You're going to put a divide, but you have to take a stance. And in taking a stance, this is kind of it. There's a contradiction around being able to, it's the having it all and then saying, like, this is how we feel about it. So we're redefining. And I think that's it. I think it's a critical eruption, a moment in time where you have to choose something over something else. And that's not going to make everybody in your world happy. And so this is kind of pushing on that. It's saying we stand for something. We can't stand for everything. So
I love it. And I imagine it pretty quickly lets you know who's with you in this journey, right? Who is courageous enough and okay enough to stand alongside you. So I'm sorry, the spotlighting and the pinning is all weird. I'm trying to get both of you on film and I don't know what I'm doing.
Here, we're all
yay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Right here. I mean, I even disappeared there for a hot minute. So I'm sorry.
So I want to ask you, what did you think it was going to be like starting this podcast and starting this media company? And then what has it actually been like?
Wow.
I have lots of thoughts. Katie, feel free to jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the first things, and Kacie and I talk about this all the time, is that I don't think we realized how much entrepreneurship is, one, a practice, and two, an expression of ourselves. This business has been so much about Kacie and I. The personal growth was what I didn't expect. I think neither of us, we both aren't scared of hard work. We knew this was going to be hard. Everyone tells you it's going to be hard. And we walked into this and like, thank God we've had each other to hold on to, because I've never grown this much as a person in such a short span of time. And it's like, as Kacie was saying earlier, it's not just what we're learning, it's what we're having to unlearn. And that has been, I mean, that is work. So I think that in developing a practice around what does that look like, it's been a year and just now it's starting to get a little bit easier. But, you know, this first year we really dedicated to like laying the right foundation and living our values and building our partnership, because we wanted to be able to stand on something that was very stable before we push forward. But yeah, it's the personal growth. And Kacie, I don't know, please jump in. But
yeah, the biggest transition for me, there's been two. And this goes a bit to the middle finger question of, we ask a lot of guests, and this is something Katie and I've talked a lot about. It's the transition from wanting to be adored to wanting to be respected. And coming from a past life where I didn't realize that most of my validation was in my desire to be adored, and stepping into, I'm not going to be adored by everyone. I can't, right? If you do that, then you're probably leaving someone else out, and that someone is yourself. I'm going to have to be respected. And that means people aren't going to align or understand every bit of this. The second piece is, I came from the business world. I came from the consulting world, which maybe many of you do as well. And I know how to build a tech startup, right? I know like of all the playbooks, I've read the Lean Start, I know all that. And it wasn't until I recently went through a women's CEO training course, and they said, they were talking about the business, and something just didn't sit right. And I realized for the first time, we are not a business that does art. We are artists who have a business. And that pivot, and this is not the first time that I've heard, and over the past several months, I've heard a lot of women entrepreneurs refer to themselves as artists with their business as their medium or their, you know, their paintbrushes, so to speak. And it was that pivot to say, what do you have to say? You need to figure out what you want to say, what you stand for, what you want to be respected for, and then go build around that. But to go take somebody else's playbook, who really, if you look at what's out there today, yes, there are absolutely valuable frameworks and methodologies, but they are a very specific playbook of what that looks like. They're not always built for someone who might be a multi-hyphenate, which is an emerging trend that's coming out of having multiple sides of ourselves where we want to monetize and express. It may not be someone who is a mother. And I'll put a, you know, for me, I'm a full-time mother in addition to entrepreneur. My husband is in the middle of, thank goodness I have a partner who has, you know, full-time job to be able to pay some of the bills and health insurance, but he's also in the midst of doing an MBA program. So, you know, you layer that into this, you layer into the idea of, what it looks like to network in the middle of a pandemic. And it's not organic connections that are happening at the co-working space. They're very intentional ones that you're seeking out. So it was all of these things that I found that traditional playbooks didn't offer, that we were writing real time for ourselves and also paying attention to what felt good and what didn't. And that's something that you don't hear a lot. A lot of entrepreneurship messaging out there is it's going to be hard, the long hours, the hustle. And we're committed to building differently. It's not to say this is the only way, the way we're doing it, but we are doing something that serves us and I think resonates with a lot of women and maybe just models a different way. It's one of our values. We believe in many ways, not one way.
Or create a different
Tell the
playbook,
win
right?
story.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, not at all. I was going to ask you, did you tell about playing to win instead of?
Yeah,
you
let's
tell them
talk about that. That to me is like one of the most perfect anecdotes.
Yeah, this is a good one. So when Kacie did this, you know, CEO course, she called me. I was traveling in Florida, and she called and said, today in the class they said, you know, what would you do differently if you were playing to win instead of just playing not to lose? And both of us were like, okay, we're gonna think about that, and like, you know, we got hype around it, and we were like, we're gonna sit with that for a little bit, and I'm thinking the whole time, like, I am a Capricorn, I'm gonna come to win every single time. So I'm like trying to, like, I'm racking my brain, like, what is it that we could do differently? And about 3 or 4 days later, I was driving home, like an 11-hour drive, and I got really fired up. And I was in the car thinking about this whole thing, and I called her and I said, "What are we trying to win?" And I was like, "What are we trying to win?" Like that is so, like, that language is dead to me. Like, I was like, we're trying to build a company that helps all women rise, and that's such a, like, mindset of scarcity rather than abundance. And that's saying that there can only be, like, so many at the top, and then also, like, who are we stepping on if we're trying to get to the top? That's not at all what we stand for. And so this was, again, like an unlearning, because it's always been about winning at the top, being in the top accolades of whatever it is in your profession. And so that's been a huge switch for, I think, both of us, coming from a very professional setting.
What a beautiful mind shift, right? Because to your point, if you're winning it all, who are you stepping on to get there? Or whose doors are you not opening? Because you've got to get through it first and then close it so nobody else follows you. Yeah, I love that. You all have 6,500, close to 7,000 listeners. How did you even begin to build that base? Because I can think of like 30 people that are my friends, right? So what did that growth look like for you?
Yeah, it's such a great question. We actually I think we're rounding out 7,500 with the launch of our
Congratulations.
Thank you. And a couple of things. Someone told me a long time ago, and it sounds so salesy, but it's true. Your network is your net worth. And I don't mean that in, like, you got to know wealthy people. That's not what I'm saying. But these are people that surround you, that want to support you. And I found that you had to tell them how to support you. You had to invite them in, right? Like, Melissa, that's how you and I reconnected. You and I knew each other from this past world. So there was a level of bravery. And I think intentionality that came with saying, I'm not going to just reach out to my 30 besties for the resties that are, like, going to support me no matter what. I'm going to reach out to people who maybe know me fractionally, who maybe I've interacted with in this way, give them an option out. Hey, if this isn't for you, you don't want to be included, please just shoot me back a note, like, thanks, but no thanks, or a smiley face, something that didn't make them feel like a jerk. But I reached out to over 300 people. I went through my LinkedIn. I pulled people who I knew in fractional ways that maybe I just felt the connection with. I reached out to friends of friends who I said, like, do you think they would like this? So I did a lot of initial work on that. And when I sent that initial email out, people, you would be shocked. Yes, it was from the close friends, but it was people who I had 1, 2, 5 interactions with that said, this is amazing. I see some of them on the call right now. A former client of mine, Lisa Eubank, shout out. Like, I sent that note to say, hey, this is in a new capacity in which you don't know me, but I'm doing this, and I think that I might resonate with you, and I invite you along. That is word of mouth. That is the power of that. And so when I say your network is your net worth, it's realize that you have resources available, and let them work on your behalf. This is not you tooting your own horn or making yourself, your ego out there. It's saying, like, I'm doing something and I'm inviting you along. That was how we started. Within the first probably 6 to 8 weeks, we had 1,000 downloads. That was people that just said, like, I'm curious what you're doing. That also was not being afraid to put the middle finger out there. Some people were like, wow, that's really aggressive. They're not our people. That's not them saying anything bad about me. That just maybe doesn't resonate with them. I think that as women, we have to separate people not liking your ideas from not liking you. That's something that we so often, I connect as one and the same, and being okay with that. The other piece was then giving people a playbook on how to support you. So every guest we have on the show, you better believe we say, hey, thank you for being here. Our best way to grow our listenership and to get your message out there is to share with your audience. Our number one way of organic growth is whoever is a guest on our show, they share it to their 30, their 100 who love and adore them. And then those people listen once, they're like, oh, I want to listen again. So it's some of, I think, yes, very strategic sales and business development, but it's also having something good to say, right? There's a level of, go ahead, Katie, I see you want to jump in too.
No, I think one of the most, like, magical things that I love about this podcast is at the end of each recording, we particularly have chosen women that are women that everyone can relate to. They're not Brene Browns, they're not Oprahs, they're, you know what I mean? And maybe they are in their souls and hearts, but but I think that, you know, they always say, why are you reaching out to me? Like, I don't really know what my story is. And at the end of speaking with Kacie and so many of these, they say, I didn't realize I had a story to tell.
Yes.
And the ripple effect of that is gorgeous. I mean, to me, that is like, that's them stepping into their power and then wanting to share. And even if it's just, maybe they don't become listeners of the podcast, but maybe they just feel a little bit more powerful when they talk to their friends and they're owning their story. And that's what we're here for. So for me, that's I think the ripple effect of what we're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, and I'm the beneficiary of that because Kacie did reach out, and I remember getting that first email and thinking, oh, she is not going there. Oh, this is so, like, how is she doing this? This is so brave, because what both of you have done is you've had to make yourselves very vulnerable, right? And now that and it took me a minute, y'all. I did not sign up to be on the podcast immediately, and I did, and then had buyer's remorse. And then after we taped it, like, I still, like, that night, like, my heart was racing. I was like, what did I say? What has been recorded for all of eternity? But also a feeling of that is okay. My story is my story, and it's out there, and it's the truth, and it's authentic, as scary as that is. But it also feels very powerful. And you've talked to, among others, besides me, artists, an Emmy-nominated actress, two sisters who chatted with you about sisterhood, other corporate women who have left it all to do something else, a yoga practitioner. How do you find and how do you decide who to feature on your podcast?
Such a good question. While I love all the big names that are out there, I'm obsessed with, like Katie said, the Brenes, our hometown hero, Sarah Blakely, as much as the next person. Like, yes, they fill my soul the same way. I found that when I went through my own FIA moments, as we call them, I looked at them and said, but they're the exception. They're the one in the million. They're not me. They don't have the financial woes. They don't have the insecurity. And so when we set out to do this, we said, we want to tell the stories of the everyday women. And the minute I say to you, who is a woman in your life that inspires you to do it her own way? Katie was my inspiration. She left this 7-year relationship. And while, yes, it was painful and messy, she said, and this is a chance to choose myself, and I'm going to do it in a bold way. And I thought, like, what a beautiful way to look at that. What an empowered stance. It's not that you don't feel the pain, but that you have the control over that narrative. That, to me, and every single woman, here's my mom, here's my sister, here's my friend, here's my like, there is no shortage of women who inspire one another. And that was the start of it. Mm-hmm. The fact that you can't say, oh my God, well, this is one in a million. No, this is just the woman who started a yoga practice while her husband was serving abroad in the military, and she was doing it because it was her own mental health crisis. Like, oh, I can relate to that. The thing that we ask all women is, you got to come on the show and you got to be willing to share the ugly. Katie always says, live in the mess. If you come on and you're like, it was really hard, but then I started my business and I'm making like great money, my husband and I, or my partner and I, like my kid, like, again, mm-hmm. I feel the most alone in the presence of perfection. And I also call BS, because that is not the truth. And so we have to be really diligent. And there are episodes that we record where somebody says, I actually haven't had one of those moments. Well, great. Then I don't think that you're probably the guest for the show. And that's no harm, no foul on you. That's amazing that your life has been without that. But that's not the goal here. And so I think that being really intentional around our vision and mission, inviting those women in, and being able then to have a barometer, not of are they good or bad, but do they meet our values? That has been something that it makes it just very straightforward and very objective. And are you willing to go there?
Mm-hmm. So we all have these voices in our head, right, that tell us either what we should be doing or that what we're doing isn't the right path. What do the voices in your head say now? And how is that? What does it say now that you're a year into this, that you are living intentionally the way you want to connect with people, the goals you have for yourself? You're intentionally trying to create those connections, offer a platform, share those authentic stories. What are your voices telling you about yourselves? now?
I think, Melissa, I think intention is the key word there. Like, I think that's what Kacie and I have tried to just stick to as closely as possible, is really sticking to those values. Now we're looking at, you know, and building differently. Revenue is almost something that we had to kind of sideswipe and put off to the side and say, like, hey, we know this is going to come, but we don't want to just like jump for the first thing. Like, we want to be patient and build this audience really organically. We want to meet people where they are. And so our focus now, after kind of laying this foundational year, is to be where women consume, you know, media, where they consume content, and we want it to be damn good.
Yeah.
And so we want to be, you know, we want to be there and start to really, like, organically and by word of mouth, continue to build this community and facilitate conversations, and just continue to stay true, because I think the more we can stay in our magic, we realize, like, the opportunities come to us. We don't have to work nearly as hard to push that agenda, and it just feels so much better and organic. Kacie, maybe you can speak to that, but I think intention has been what we're leading with.
Yeah, there's a great piece that our friend Twana Harris shared with us. Ava DuVernay has a talk around the attention of your intention. And that's a great one, I just think, for any founder, any woman, any person, of just recognizing that the intention, going back to, again, goal setting, if it's just this binary, this binary goal, then either if you fulfill it, you feel empty because now what? And if you don't, you feel like, well, I'm a loser because I didn't. So being able to really set an intentions based on something that's going to feed your soul is important. I'm going to share, so Katie gave the optimistic view. I'm going to talk about the voices in my head of my insecurities.
And this is our personalities right here, right?
Yeah, Katie is like, y'all, we're gonna be okay. Like, let's ground with the universe. We are here. And I'm like, and the world is burning. And it's right, it's good. I think I can push us forward and she can help us smell the flat. Like, there's a beautiful balance in that. But for me, it's coming from the business world, right? We all go into business at the end of the day to make money. How are you going to make money? And I think that's a fear that often we have to talk through. We have to name, I have to get it out on paper. Writing is just super helpful, conversations like this, to be able to make those fears smaller by just naming them. We've never been artists as our profession. We've been marketing and sales leaders. We've been nonprofit, advocacy expert. Like, we've been all these other things, but we are new in this career. It's terrifying. I think, are we still valuable to the people that are in our network and in our, circles, if we're not offering them value in the traditional ways? What if we turn some men away because they feel like we're anti-men? We're not. We're pro-women. And I think that that's a fundamental challenge within itself. Just because you're pro-women, people say, are you anti-men? And no, that's not it. I think that we've had amazing opportunities that have come on the table around, how to amplify our voice, getting into new channels, and the fear that those will go away if we don't do them all immediately, right? You get, oh, hey, here's a really exciting funding opportunity or a platform. And you think, well, if I don't do it now and I can't just grip it so tight, I'm never going to be relevant again. Those are things that we battle all the time. Some days we're in the business of being creative. I don't really feel creative. I feel like I want to lay in bed and cry. And how do you really get up and tell women that they can do this? I feel like a fraud a lot of days, because the things that I'm telling people to go learn and live in your power, I fall into the exact same shitty patterns that I was trying to overcome. I'm not a good communicator in my marriage. I compare myself against other women. I feel like there's only those are all the things. And so I think that also a year, oh my God, guys, we did it. All right, well, what's year 2? And those are the things that I think, that becomes the entrepreneurship as a practice that Katie talked about, is recognizing that there was a shift in my values that happened last year. If you asked me a year ago what my values were, it was to be honest and to be known. And my shift has to be, I want to do work worth being known for, because if it's just on being known, that's reliant on an external validator of whether they find me worthy of being known, and instead sitting in the place of, is this work worth doing? And that's where I 10 out of 10 recommend going into business with your best friend, someone that, not maybe everyone, but for me, it was the perfect thing because she knows all of Kacie and she knows how to then speak to, hey, you're pulling this part of yourself. That's maybe, like, let's talk about that, and vice versa. So I think that especially for the business we're in, one in which it is dedicated to women and breaking free of these barriers, real and perceived, like those are the voices in my head every single day. Today, my husband said, I'm going to join on. I'm like, oh shit. Well, now there's men here. I'm not in the safety of women. I have to, what are we going to say? That's really groundbreaking. Like those are, this imposter syndrome of, am I good enough? Every day.
In our founders learn and our teams learn that the hardest part, or one of the hardest parts of building your project, is putting together this team, right? This team that's actually going to work well together. And I love hearing how you balance each other. Not all of our founders are going to be with their best friends, right? But finding someone who can be the sunshine to your cloudy day is really important. And I'm sure at some point those roles switch, right? And Kacie, you have to know, okay?
Oh yes, every day.
Okay.
Every day. We
yeah.
They do all the time. And we're never aligned. We're never aligned. If
That's
I'm
perfect,
having a rough
though.
week,
Yeah.
we switch.
So Allie is on the call, and she and I met. She was in our inaugural Female Founders program that we kicked off last fall, and we've stayed in touch, and I'm thrilled she's on today. And I know that she has a question. So Allie, I'm going to give you the floor.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. First of all, thank you guys so much. This has been incredibly encouraging. And so you guys were talking about your network, and recently Melissa actually introduced me with someone that she thought would be good for my professional network, but hinted that she could be a friend. And so when we met up, we talked business for 15 minutes, and then we just found that we really clicked. And she's awesome. She's in a healthcare startup, which is similar to what I'm working on in school, as well as a startup. So, and we just had this conversation where we your it all moments. I'm I've had that moment. I've had a moment like that. Just I've had a moment like that. And we found that there's just a lot that, things that stressed us out, that we felt like we were the only ones dealing with it. And when we got to have that conversation, we realized other women are going through it. And we found that because both of us got into these entrepreneurial roles during COVID, it's been really isolating. And it was probably both of our first time to have an in-person meeting with another female that we could just I don't know, vent almost, but it was more than venting. I don't know. So we also talked about, what does Atlanta have to offer for women who are an entrepreneur to in person or virtually this setup, where we could sit down and talk to each other and be hey, I've had this problem. How did you deal with it? And so where, I guess there's multiple questions to that. How do you build that network of it being where it is professional, but it's also a friendship, and a support system, I guess. And then how do you do that in COVID? And then do you know of any things in Atlanta that we can meet up? So she and I are going to the dog park tomorrow. It's nothing fancy, but it's just nice to have someone who I know is going through it too. We could just watch our dogs play.
Love that. Katie, feel free to jump in if you have thoughts. I have some initial ones, but I'd love to hear from you too.
You go first. You're more grounded in Atlanta, so you maybe address that, and then I'll tag
Still
in.
in Atlanta.
I'm still a newbie.
One, I think what you did, you brought your whole self to those interactions. I think it's really hard when we want others to be vulnerable and to, create these personal connections if we're not first willing to put ourselves out there. There was a guest on our show, Amanda Getz. She formerly ran marketing at The Knot and recently has started a women's CBD company called House of Wise. And she said that she started this concept of I'll go first. For her, it started after a woman that she was working with had a miscarriage and felt really alone. And Amanda had one years prior. And it was this idea that there's so many of us experiencing the same things that I'm going to take this step and be brave, and I'll go first. I'll share my experience because it invites others to do the same. Katie and I have a saying that when we live boldly, we invite others to do the same. That's true with vulnerability. The more you give of what you're seeking to receive, the more it will come back to you. if that's vulnerability, if that's honesty, if that's abundance and connections, wealth, whatever that is. And that truly is a mindset shift that I think takes a lot of intention. So one, keep doing what you did, where you led with all of you, not just the part of you that you felt like was transactionally relevant. I think that the other piece of it is great women know great women. And inviting that in, creating a space to say, hey, whether it's you facilitating it to say, hey, I want to do a coffee, and being willing to put some structure out there. We all have good intentions, right? Oh my God, I want to do women's events. Oh, I want to connect with so-and-so. And we're sitting here waiting for someone to create that for us. That may not be your job, but if you take one step, there can be momentum that creates. So you and this other woman to say, hey, what if I bring a friend and you bring a friend and we do monthly lunch? We do a coffee, we do whatever it is. Like, it doesn't have to be the end all be all, and you don't have to have the answers or even be the facilitator and orchestrator. But if you can start that, that's really powerful. I think that groups like this, you get what you give. So pouring in and participating, right? Like, these are only as valuable. If 2 people showed up today, this group loses a lot of its value. But when everybody comes and is participatory, we are members. I'm a member of the Lola here in Atlanta. It's a women's co-working space. I think it depends what you're looking to get out of it, you know, from a business perspective, networking. There's also ones like Switch Yards, where it's just a place to convene. They are COVID safe. They're being mindful of, you know, mask wearing, vaccine, the whole thing. So you have to judge what's appropriate for you, but being able to go and just sometimes being in those spaces. And then I would say sign up for our newsletter, because we have some things coming at allmedia.co. Sign up for that, because there are spaces that we are looking to say, we say creating proverbial and real safe spaces to have these conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And Olivia had a follow on to that. Olivia, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, everybody. Yes, I would. And I just want to start by saying I love the energy on this call. We need to support each other like this. And this is one of the few spaces I just feel so welcome and embraced. So thank you guys so much. And to tag on a little bit to what Kacie was just saying, I'm also a member at the Gathering Spot, and they have a tremendous amount of resources. And I love actually what you just were saying, because I completed the Women's Export University through the city of Atlanta during COVID. So we didn't have an opportunity to meet. So I created an actual meeting that we're going to try to make it quarterly to continue that conversation. But I have a small consulting agency. We manage a marketing tech stack for professional services firms with focus on the legal profession and in the entertainment space. I have 2 powerful women who have sat in seats very similar to mine at different law firms. So we all bring this really great perspective. I really feel like we are the trifecta. We are exceptional in our particular areas, and you know, we also understand what it's like to be a woman in this particular space, et cetera. And I really want to acknowledge that and bring them on as partners. I feel like we're way more powerful in that capacity, because I started this company on my own. I just don't know what I don't know. I don't know what, you know, full partnership should entail or would entail. And I really do understand we should focus on each of our strengths and each of our weaknesses, so we can support each other through these things. We each have a specialty, we have, you know, particular knowledge base, et cetera. But I feel like I'm concerned about, you know, what might be waiting for us that we should consider ahead of time that we haven't thought about in terms of partnership agreements. My goal is to make sure that as you guys mentioned, you guys are great friends and you guys have that relationship, and that's what matters. And for me, I feel the exact same way. At the end of the day, I value them as people more than anything. So I want to make sure that I'm respectful across the board, and that we continue to be on the same page and they feel that as well. And so I want that reflected in the partnership agreement. So I would love any thoughts or suggestions behind that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll just jump in and say, like, I think originally beyond, like, obviously we knew we had to set up the legality bit around our partnership, but I mentioned briefly that in January we sat down, we did like a retreat where we did values exercises, and Kacie and I both kind of identified what our values were. We started to think about what we wanted for the company. We laid out every worst case scenario that could possibly happen. as the eternal optimist in the family, she had to say, okay, here they are. But I think looking at all of those different things and looking at what 5 years down the road might look like, what are 10 years down the road, you know, what if our family dynamics change? What if, you know, one of us wants to live internationally and split time? What does that all look like? And so I think so much of what we did in the beginning was so helpful to make sure that we were on the same page. I think personally with how we envisioned it all going forward and what we were trying to create. And so I would definitely recommend doing that just kind of around values as well, more than just like the legal side. I would say for she and I, that was building differently and how it kicked off for us when we realized that we didn't want to be kind of labeled in the same, oh, like women can be so catty or competitive, or, you know, this is all those labels that you get, and especially best friends. I can't tell you, even members of my family have been like, you guys have like a really strong legal partnership, like is everything laid out? and I'm like, yeah, I feel great. We're good here. Like, thank you. Like, I understand the concerns, but you hear the horror stories. But I think laying the strong foundation is what it's all about.
Yeah.
So we are at time, but can I ask you one more question?
Of course.
Okay.
Sure.
And I know folks might have that 1 o'clock meeting that's looming. So don't worry if you have to drop off. We're going to send this recording to everyone today so that you can also share it with your, what did you call them? Your
Besties for the resties.
besties. Yeah, there you go. Okay. What are you most excited about? What's coming up? And not necessarily, you know, something that's happening in terms of some kind of amazing metric or funding opportunity, or, you know, what's exciting to you? What are you looking forward to?
I have mine. Katie, you want to?
No, you go first. I just talked.
Look at us, so gracious.
Oh yeah.
You go first. No, you go first.
You go. You hang out.
I'm excited so over the past year of creating this, we've talked to a ton of women, some on the show, most in life. There's a body of research that has come out of this. We are, you know, word nerds, we are communication experts. There is a body of language and vocabulary that we've been able to name and create. And that to me is what I am so excited about, because you can't be what you don't see. And right now we only see certain models. So we have this in 2022, being able to start sharing some of this language. For instance, I'm not here to empower anyone. There is no power for me to give. You are already in your power. And so it's even nuances of that, because as women, whether we are doing this ourselves, we borrow all these things from society. And these are things that are ingrained from us from day one. Idea of being a good girl, the idea of being adored versus respected. And so being able to not only, I think, observe these, but then give language and story and narrative. Our whole culture, way of being, belief system is built on stories. And lucky for us, we are in the business of telling them. And that is our superpower. And so I am so excited, because I think that so many people, and I'm sure as women in business, you hear this, are you guys a lifestyle business? Makes me want to just, and the fact that we are able, I think, to invite some other people around that maybe haven't been able to understand the essence of this. You all as women founders, you get it, but we're able to now create this space of almost an academic element to our business to say, here's the language. We're able to name things. I'm thrilled about it, because I think it's just going to open this door and give us the tools to have the conversations around what do the systems really look like. And then as individuals, how do we begin to exercise what we call that FIA mindset? How do you begin to practice that?
Do you have an idea of how you want to do that?
Yeah, we have lots of ideas.
That was a great non-answer.
Good media person in me. That's Katie would be proud. Get you.
Thanks for those talking points. I'm sorry. No, I would have to I can build on that, but I definitely agree with Kacie. I think coming from kind of the systems change, social impact side, I'm very, very excited about what that looks like. And I think there's been a lot of unexpected. I didn't really think about the research component as much as it's come to fruition over the last year. And so that is very exciting to me. I think there's also been a reframing. So we do have some exciting news coming out like within the next month of this year, a new product. And so with that, like, I think so much of like the storytelling, we have a woman creator that we're working with, and she has the superpower of taking feelings and putting them to story, where she can literally make, like, she'll talk about the Odyssey and she will talk about religious writings from Mesopotamia, and she can tell you like how to, that all of this feeling, and she's you know, in her late 60s, and Kacie and I are in our 30s, and we are going through similar experiences at the same time, and it's so validating. And then to hear her say like, it's okay to be in this space, and then I'm going to help you like digest and understand what you're going through via story. And I think to us that's so much of what we're creating here, why we're a media company. And I think the concept of all of this is not having to be the subject matter expert. I think I've always come in professionally, personal vulnerability has always come pretty naturally to me, but professional vulnerability is next level. That is so hard, because that's been a space where I feel safe, and having to kind of expose that this year, be more in my feelings, feel like I have to be the expert in everything that I do. This is like giving us permission to question everything and walk with people and not have the answers, but ask the questions, and maybe not even the right questions. And so I think that exploration has been personally empowering to me, and the storytelling component that kind of helps me along on my journey. I feel like I have the ability to share those experiences, but also walk alongside phenomenal women that are doing the same.
This has been a breath of fresh air. Thank you both for chatting with us today. Katie, Kacie, we really appreciate you talking about your journey, letting our entrepreneurs learn from you, hearing the importance of setting your intention with life, and then moving toward that and doing the things that will help you actually fulfill what you really want to do while you're here. And for your authenticity with our women about the highs and the lows, and the voices in our head that sometimes say amazing things and more often have us question everything. So we thank you. We thank you for being here. It was a pleasure to talk with you today.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you so
you.
much, Katie.
Thank you, everyone. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, such a gift.
And that's a wrap. Leah, can you stop recording, please?
Yeah.
Or maybe we should keep it going for any